Ajay Bodke also joining us this morning. Ajay, let me also get your take on GST. I mean, we'll pull up some of the logistics names, and yesterday, of course, they were all cracking. But it looks like it's nearing the finish line now, and that could be a huge, a huge achievement for this government that's been looking to somehow push through some key reforms.
Good morning. I tend to agree with you. I think the long-awaited GST bill, it does look likely that the government has been able to evolve a consensus, especially among all the non-Congress parties and all the regional parties in particular are on board because most of these states are consuming states, and they are going to be large beneficiaries if the GST is rolled out. I think the signals look very positive that in the monsoon session the government should be able to table and hopefully get the legislation through for an eventual rollout from 1st of April 2017. Now this is a continuum of the last session in which extremely strong productive business happened, and 4 key economic legislations that were pending for years the government was able to clear. I think the Aadhaar bill, the real estate regulation bill, the bankruptcy and insolvency protection bill, and the amendments to the Mines and Minerals Act, which is holding back a lot of M&As in the cement sector and other industries. So I think the legislative agenda, the government is focusing on economic legislative agenda in particular, and the markets, I think, should take a positive cue. Now, this should be seen in the context of the last earnings season, which has been extremely strong insofar as volume growth in many industries is concerned. When one looks at cement sector or paint sector or even FMCG names, I think despite the rural demand being tepid as a result of 2 successive monsoon failures, we are seeing the first signs of turnaround in the economy manifesting in the strong volume growth. Albeit the pricing power is not yet back. But the commentary from these companies suggested that if the monsoons, which unfortunately have been delayed now for more than 10 days, but there is a consensus among meteorological agencies that the monsoons will be above normal and will pick up as we move into July, August and September due to La Nina effect. Now that should spur a lot of rural consumption demand post-harvest, and that coupled with the large paychecks which will accrue to central government employees once the Committee of Secretaries submits its report as early as I think the first week of July, will lead to a strong upsurge in consumption demand. And that's why I think the market, one has to be constructive in the medium term, and every dip needs to be bought into the market. There are 2 or 3 issues that one needs to look at from the headwinds perspective. One obviously is what happens on 23rd of June. I think if Brexit were to happen, then the architecture that has been laid for 30 to 40 years in terms of trade and investment dependence between UK and the rest of Europe will come undone. And markets hate uncertainty. Businesses will hold back from investments. Consumers will hold back from consumption decisions till a new architecture comes into place, which might take weeks, if not months. And also, I think the spike in food inflation, I think also is a worry, that will hold back the RBI from cutting rates. So I think these are 2 factors one needs to be closely watching.
Okay, Ajay, thanks for setting the tone there. Let me also get today on the back of the aviation policy that's also coming up for consideration today. Let's get a quick check on that from Ajay. Ajay, what's your take on aviation currently?
I think we are constructive on SpiceJet. We believe that there is still some upside left. However, there is an overhang of the case that's going on between the Marans and the promoters, and the outcome of that case, I think, will decide which way the stock will move in the medium term. I think if the case were to go in favor of Marans, and there's a very strong dilution that investors will need to brace themselves for. Also, I think the fact that the crude prices have moved up sharply, I think will weigh on sentiment. So I think these are the 2 headwinds that the investors will have to grapple with. Otherwise, operationally, I think the load factors are very strong. The pricing power is with the airlines. There is still some time for supply to come into the industry. So structurally, it looks positive, but for these 2 headwinds that I just mentioned.
Ajay, there's been a lot of news around some of these PSUs. So let me just get your take on some of them. And PNB, for instance, also in the news today on declaring that list of willful defaulters. Also on reports of hiring 3 banks for its IPO, the NBFC IPO that's coming up there. But what would you advise when it comes to some of these PSUs? Are there select names that you still would possibly look at? Are you still shying away from them?
Yeah, I think we feel that although the worst might be over, it will still be a couple of quarters before the revival in the asset quality in case of PSU banks would happen. And our interaction with the banking sector, both in the retail-focused private banks, corporate-focused private banks, as well as PSUs, makes us believe that one needs to allocate a large amount in the medium term still to retail-focused private banks. Because the asset quality woes still will continue to haunt the public sector banks for some time to come. Capital also could be a problem for them, which will constrain growth. And hence, with the exception of SBI, where one can still look at some allocation on dips, one needs to, in our opinion, stay away from the PSU banking universe.
Ajay, I just, maybe I somewhere lost it in all this GST. We'd all assumed that GST is the greatest thing happening. We spoke to one of the big accounting firms in the morning, and he's saying the service tax is actually going to go up to 18% in the GST. And he's saying on the goods side, it could be 18%. They haven't even decided it, maybe even 26%. I'm just wondering, what is the excitement? I mean, do people want to pay more taxes? I mean, I can understand the states, and they will spend anything you give them. But how does it change life for us? Here we are paying 15% of service tax, have to pay 18%, and I don't even know what the goods is. It's going to be 18 to 26%. Your thoughts, Ajay, just from a perspective of, the amount of money being sucked out from the economy.
Yeah, I think I should tend to agree with you. The higher the tax rate, I think, the nastier could be the impact that the market would feel. However, there seems to be a broad consensus among the national parties and the regional parties that the revenue neutral rate needs to be kept as moderate as possible. And hence, I think the 18% rate that more or less is being spoken about, although it's not yet been confirmed, is the rate that the market is currently going with. Now, in case the rate were to be significantly higher than that, then that could sort of be taken very negatively. But the workings that the market is currently believing in is clearly at around 18%. So that's why the excitement is. The excitement essentially is because of the cost savings that could accrue to a large sectors of the economy, which because of various state level taxes have set up the architecture of the distribution of their logistics in an inefficient manner. And our interaction with companies in various sectors makes us believe that once the rollout happens, a large amount of cost savings could come their way, because they already have laid out, they already have plans, contingency plans ready in terms of right sizing their distribution network, their logistics network. So there could be a lot of cost savings coming out there. And that is why there is so much of excitement about GST.
Ajay, thanks so much for joining us this morning.